Greetings, my dear wizards, witches, muggles, and squibs. Welcome to a brand new special episode of the Spellbook Chronicles, which means a longer, more in-depth story. Today, we will explore a tale that profoundly changed the course of events in the wizarding world. The story of Lily Evans and Severus Snape. A story of friendship, love, and sacrifice, but above all, a story full of regrets. Lily, the girl with a pure heart, and Severus, the lonely boy full of anger and resentment. A meeting that created a special bond, one that would test them both, and one that would indirectly lead to the ultimate fall of the Dark Lord. Strange and unpredictable, the way fate works, don't you think? But tell me, if Snape didn't join the Death Eaters and Lily didn't end up with James, how do you think things would have turned out? Would the Dark Lord still have fallen, even without Harry Potter? Drop your theory in the comments. All right, get your butterbeers ready and tissues also. Yes, because this time, I'm afraid you'll need them more than popcorn. And now, let the story finally begin.
Once upon a time, they were just two children gazing at each other across the thin line that separates light from shadow. She, the warmth of an endless summer, the first genuine smile he had ever received. He, a soul starved for belonging, a boy who knew of a magical world so vibrant compared to the gray streets of his suburban neighborhood. We do not choose who becomes our universe. Sometimes, it is an accidental encounter, a spark in the darkness that turns into a beacon. And sometimes, that universe collapses under the weight of choices, of pride, of wounds, carved too deep to ever be mended. Was it love? Was it friendship? Was it obsession? Perhaps it was all of these at once. And perhaps fate always knew there was no other way. For without the tragedy, there would be no legend. The legend of Harry Potter, the boy who lived. Like many great stories in the wizarding world, this one also begins with an important pure-blood legacy. The Prince family. It was 1930 when Eileen, the eldest daughter, was born. Although no details are certain, it seems that Eileen grew up in a hostile environment, despite her family's wealth. Her father and relatives had hoped desperately for a male heir, a hope her mother had not been able to fulfill. While the world was engulfed in the global wizarding war, led by the dark wizard Gellert Grindelwald, Eileen, like every young witch of her age, began attending Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, where she was presumably sorted into Slytherin House. Despite her excellent magical abilities, Eileen struggled to make many friends during her school years, partly due to the introversion developed in her childhood and partly due to her fascination with the dark arts. In general, other students saw Eileen as both dangerous and odd, a sentiment reinforced by her passion for Hogwarts' least popular extracurricular activity, gobstones. This ancient wizarding game resembles Muggle marbles, except that each time a player loses a point, the winning stone sprays a foul-smelling liquid onto the loser's face. Eileen's enthusiasm for the game was so great that she became captain of the school Gobstones team in her 5th year, as well as serving as president of the Hogwarts Gobstone Club. Years passed, and with the end of school came the end of the small world the young witch had built for herself, a world of her own, far from home and her father's hatred. It's unclear what exactly happened, but it's likely that after graduating, she left her family and found a job in the Muggle world to escape their control. It was then, after moving to the Midlands of England, that she met Tobias Snape.
Hello.
A young man who was exceptionally kind to her.
My name is Tobias.
A Muggle.
Eileen.
Perhaps enchanted by an affection she had never known before, Eileen unexpectedly fell in love. Months passed, as did seasons, until the two decided to wed. Her choice to marry a Muggle man may have led to her being disowned by the Prince family, much like Andromeda Tonks, who was cast out by the House of Black for the same reason. Due to Tobias's working-class job, they were forced to move from the countryside to Spinner's End, a shabby suburb of Copeworth, near a dirty river and full of dilapidated houses, disused factories, and broken-down street lamps. Life was not easy there. Tobias's factory job brought in meager wages, and Eileen struggled to find work in that world, feeling out of place and beginning to harbor a faint but growing resentment toward Muggles.
Need some help,
Likewise,
sweetheart?
Tobias began to resent her for her passivity. Things worsened when Eileen unexpectedly became pregnant with an unwanted child.
I want to keep it.
Despite her husband's opposition, the witch chose to keep the baby. Perhaps her son would be her salvation from that meaningless reality. And so, in January 1960, Severus Snape was born. The boy, just like his mother before him, grew up in a world devoid of paternal affection. Tobias, who had started drinking during those years and was becoming increasingly aggressive, hated the little brat, who, in his view, had ruined his life. Severus's childhood was plagued by the tumultuous, explosive atmosphere in the home, with his parents often fighting. Tobias would shout at Eileen and may have been physically abusive as well. The witch, despite her initial longing for motherhood, grew increasingly depressed, and as time went on, she struggled to show much affection toward the child, neglecting him more and more.
Mom?
While some magical scholars believe that psychological stress during early childhood can lead to the repression of one's magical powers, it is also theorized that the opposite effect can occur. Perhaps for this reason, young Severus, long before his 10th birthday, began to show an exceptional aptitude for magic, demonstrating a natural talent like no other. It is likely that Eileen, noticing her son's incredible abilities, began secretly teaching him out of her husband's sight, as Tobias had never truly understood or known much about their magical nature.
We'd have to talk.
Thus, young Severus, even before receiving his acceptance letter to Hogwarts, had already learned high-level spells and secrets of the dark arts. It would therefore come as no surprise when Sirius Black later claimed that Snape, when he arrived at school, knew more hexes than half of the 7th-year students. In addition to this, the child soon demonstrated a remarkable ability in legilimency, a rare skill that allowed him to navigate the intricate layers of another person's mind and emotions. A wizard who practiced this art was known as a legilimens, capable of uncovering thoughts, secrets, and feelings hidden deep within others. It was during a summer of those gray and difficult years in Spinner's End that Severus happened to notice a girl of his own age who lived nearby, just a few steps from the neighborhood, catching his attention. After watching her for some time, Severus noticed her evident magical abilities, and it was then that he gathered the courage to approach her. The girl, he discovered, was named Lily Evans.
My name's Lily.
It didn't take long for the two of them to become more than just great friends, almost inseparable despite the hostility from Lily's older sister, Petunia, who on several occasions had tried to discourage her from associating with that poor boy who dresses like a ragamuffin. But Severus and Lily, together, had found in their friendship a place where they could take refuge without feeling different or wrong. Their bond grew even stronger the day they both received their acceptance letters to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry.
What's this?
And so, on September 1st, 1971, Severus and Lily finally arrived at King's Cross Station in London to board the Hogwarts Express. During the journey to the castle, the two friends had the opportunity to meet two other first-year students who were anything but friendly, James Potter and Sirius Black. The two began to pick a fight with Severus over a difference of opinion about which house at Hogwarts was the best to be sorted into. Severus, proud of his mother Eileen's heritage, strongly defended the value of Slytherin, a house that had hosted some of the most exceptional wizards in magical history, like Merlin. The two responded by saying that only dark wizards end up in Slytherin.
Nice nose.
They began mocking him for his nose,
Leave him alone.
while Lily tried unsuccessfully to defend him. That first hostile encounter on the train would lay the foundations for an antagonism that would define the fate of the four for the rest of their lives. A destiny that continued to unfold that very first evening at the castle during the sorting ceremony. While Severus, as expected, was sorted into Slytherin with little hesitation from the hat, he had never imagined the possibility that his best friend Lily would be taken from him when she was sorted into Gryffindor. Seeing her smile at the same table as those two jerks from the train. Severus once again felt in that moment more alone than ever in his life. From his first year, Severus excelled in defense against the dark arts, thanks to his innate talent and the knowledge passed down from his mother Eileen. He also proved to be an exceptional potions master, probably the best student of his year, alongside Lily, with whom he remained a close friend, despite being sorted into different houses. However, unlike Lily, whose talent was immediately noticed by the clever and ambitious Professor Slughorn, always on the lookout for promising young students, who invited her to join the exclusive Slug Club, Severus remained in the shadows at Hogwarts, despite his objectively exceptional abilities. Just like his mother, Severus was an introverted young man who struggled to socialize and make friends, preferring to spend more time with books and scrolls rather than drinking butterbeer at the Three Broomsticks, like that herd of sheep. This tendency towards introversion, masked as an overt sense of superiority and disdain towards his peers, especially Muggles, only strengthened the contrast and rivalry between him and James Potter, who, along with Sirius Black and two other Gryffindors, Remus Lupin and Peter Pettigrew, had become the most popular and arrogant quartet in all of Hogwarts, the Marauders. Potter, the typical popular and arrogant student, took great pleasure in mocking Severus publicly, often calling him Snivelous Snape. Thankfully, Lily, despite sharing the same Gryffindor house, could not condone his behavior. James's egotism and cruelty in tormenting Severus were, in her eyes, completely unacceptable. It was during these years that Severus Snape, almost playfully, began to develop the idea of a new identity, a secret one, the Half-Blood Prince. A pseudonym that, of course, refers to his magical bloodline, the one from his mother, Prince. An interesting and curious parallel to another Slytherin, Tom Marvolo Riddle, both eager to create a new name, a new identity to hide behind, so they could rid themselves of their Muggle heritage, the part of themselves they could never face each time they looked in the mirror, their fathers. As the Half-Blood Prince, Severus secretly began experimenting with magic, altering spells, enhancing their effects, and even creating entirely new ones, curses mostly. Levicorpus, which grabbed the victim by the ankle and dangled them upside down. Muffliato, which filled the ears of anyone nearby with an unidentifiable buzzing sound. And then there was Langlock, Liberacorpus, and another hex that caused toenails to grow at an unnaturally fast rate. In addition to the spells, meticulously recorded by Severus in his copy of Advanced Potion Making, he had, of course, perfected the procedures for several potions present in the textbook, enhancing their effects. Among these were the Draught of Living Death, the Poison Antidote, and the Elixir to Induce Euphoria. Much can be said about Severus Snape, but nothing will ever change the fact that to accomplish what he did, he was undoubtedly a genius of magic. But of all his creations, there is one that is as brutal as it is lethal.
Sectum Sempra.
Sectum Sempra, a curse that tore apart its target and caused severe bleeding. So dreadful that many considered it, though unofficially, to be the fourth unforgivable curse. Blood spurted from Malfoy's face and chest, as though he had been slashed with an invisible sword. He staggered backward and collapsed onto the waterlogged floor with a great splash, his wand falling from his limp right hand. Slipping and staggering, Harry got to his feet and plunged toward Malfoy, whose face was now shining scarlet, his white hands scrabbling at his blood-soaked chest.
Did you know that exclusive Spellbook Chronicles booklets are now available? Ancient volumes filled with secrets just like the ones hidden in the restricted section. But instead of hiding from Madame Pince, all you need is a click. This Muggle technology is amazing. Each booklet contains one of the most beloved stories from the series, enriched with exclusive images. So, what are you waiting for? Start collecting them all. Your support is invaluable. Not only will you enjoy the magic, but you'll also be supporting the channel, allowing us to keep bringing you the most amazing stories, like the one in this episode. So, enjoy the show.
It is highly likely that Snape, not only for pleasure and pure ambition, conceived many of his curses as a defense against the constant attacks from the Marauders. Indeed, the group never missed an opportunity to pick a fight or mock him under the guidance of Patricia Rakepick, a fifth-year student known for her cunning and her propensity for breaking the rules. Thus, Severus began to take pleasure in trying to thwart, by any means possible, the endless pranks of Patricia and the Marauders. One night, while following Patricia, he discovered her obsessive search for the Cursed Vaults, 5 legendary hidden rooms at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, each vault shielded by a different curse placed upon it. Some alleged that the vaults housed priceless treasures, such as gold, prophecies, and other powerful magical artifacts dating back to before the school was founded, while others believed they contained dark magic. Their origin is uncertain, and it is possible they predated the founding of the school, but for many, this was nothing more than a legend. Certainly not for Patricia, who, when presenting her theory on the real existence of the cursed vaults, was dismissed. Young Snape, however, was not so certain of this judgment. Seeing her as uncommonly ambitious for a Gryffindor, and he recognized far from stupid, he eventually began to question her motives and intentions regarding the vaults, ultimately perceiving her as a threat to the school and everyone within the castle. A mystery that Snape would only solve many years later as a potions master. But that is another story for another day. As a result of these events and Patricia's involvement, the rivalry between Snape and the Marauders became even more intense. It was in this context that Severus began to associate with some of his fellow Slytherins, including Narcissa Black, Evan Rosier, Avery, Mulciber, and Wilkes. In the Slytherin common room, the group would spend many nights debating the supremacy of purebloods and the inferiority of Muggleborns, fantasizing about a utopian world and the victory of the Dark Lord, who would turn the tide of the wizarding world once the war was won. Among these Slytherins, one in particular took Severus under his wing, earning him great respect. A fifth-year prefect, Lucius Malfoy, scion of his noble house. Due to his new associations, the relationship between Severus and Lily began to deteriorate more and more. Lily could sense that something was changing in Severus. The solitude and repressed anger were turning him into someone she no longer recognized. One afternoon in the spring of their 5th year, Severus was engrossed in reading, sitting quietly by the shore of the Black Lake. Suddenly, James Potter and the Marauders appeared, furious over yet another tip-off from Snape to the caretaker Argus Filch. Severus barely had time to react.
Levicorpus!
James shouted, using one of the spells created by the Half-Blood Prince. The spell turned Severus upside down, exposing his underwear and humiliating him in front of numerous students, including Lily. She stepped in to defend Severus, but this only made things worse. In an attempt to regain his dignity, Severus, humiliated and angry, lashed out at James, and, in a moment of reckless fury, called Lily a filthy mudblood, deeply wounding her. This would forever be Severus's worst memory. That evening, Mary MacDonald heard about Severus's plan to spend the night outside the entrance to Gryffindor Tower, waiting to apologize to Lily for calling her such a hurtful name. She quickly informed her friend, who, despite her still raw pain, forced herself to leave the dormitory to meet her once close companion. When Lily finally appeared, Severus's heart leapt with hope. He didn't waste a second, pleading for her forgiveness, desperately trying to explain himself. But Lily's eyes were filled with hurt, and before she could even think of forgiving him, there was something she had to know.
Is it true?
Quietly, she asked him if it was true,
Severus.
if he truly planned to join the Death Eaters, to serve the Dark Lord once they left school. Severus paused, the weight of her question heavy in the silence that hung between them. He searched for an answer, something that might lessen her disappointment, but in the end, he couldn't bring himself to deny it. His silence spoke louder than any excuse he could muster. In that moment, Lily's expression changed. The sadness in her gaze shifted to something resolute, as though she was seeing him clearly for the first time. She realized that no matter how much she had tried to reach him, no matter how many years they had shared as friends, Severus couldn't or wouldn't change the path he had chosen, even for her. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she turned away, her heart heavy. For Lily, this was the end.
Goodbye.
Their friendship, once so deep, was over.
Severus.
The days at Hogwarts passed, as grey as they had always been at Spinner's End. It was by chance that Severus one day, intrigued by Remus Lupin's monthly disappearances, witnessed Madame Pomfrey taking the boy to the Shrieking Shack during a full moon through a secret passage beneath the Whomping Willow. But Sirius Black, eager for revenge, since he and James had lost their spots on the Gryffindor Quidditch team due to Severus's incident at the Black Lake, took advantage of Severus's curiosity and, as a joke, told him that the trick to getting past the Whomping Willow was to poke the knot at its base. The boy, following Sirius's instructions innocently, was nearly at the Shrieking Shack when James pulled him back just in time. At great personal risk, James saved Severus from certain death at the hands of Remus in his werewolf form. However, Severus stubbornly refused to believe that his old rival had acted out of goodwill, assuming instead that Potter had saved him only to avoid expulsion, and he loathed the idea of being indebted to him.
I must ask you,
Albus Dumbledore swore Severus to secrecy, but now Severus understood the true nature of Remus.
I will.
By their 7th year, James Potter had shed much of his immaturity and arrogance, becoming someone Lily could finally see herself with. After years of resistance, she agreed to start dating him. Yet despite his growth, James's animosity towards Severus remained as fierce as ever. Sirius often remarked that Severus had always been a special case for James, a rivalry that ran deeper than any ordinary schoolboy grudge. However, Severus's continued associations with students who were either sympathizers or outright supporters of the Dark Lord didn't help his already strained relationship with the Marauders, or with Lily, for that matter. As James and her relationship blossomed, Severus's bitterness only deepened.
Ah, there you are, my beloved viewers. Fear not, I'll be quicker than a golden snitch. First of all, I want to thank you all for being here for this episode of the Spellbook Chronicles. And if you think Quentin Pendragon is charming enough to deserve your generous support, you might consider leaving a like. And I highly recommend subscribing to the channel too, clicking the bell icon to make sure you don't miss a single episode. And why not, joining the channel to get priority access to every new video for just a couple of galleons. So, what are you waiting for?
The years at Hogwarts came to an end, and a new chapter awaited the young witches and wizards. The First Wizarding War was in full swing, and soon, everyone in the magical community would have to make their choice. As expected, Severus chose the path toward darkness, marking the beginning of his descent into Voldemort's ranks.
Severus.
He was branded with the Dark Mark,
Welcome.
officially becoming a Death Eater.
My lord.
Meanwhile, Lily and James, now fully immersed in the war as members of the Order of the Phoenix, found solace in each other. Their bond, forged in the midst of the war, blossomed into love, and they married in a quiet ceremony. Not long after, their joy was complete with the birth of a son, Harry. Although Severus's actions as a Death Eater remain largely shrouded in mystery, it's clear that he quickly rose to prominence within Voldemort's inner circle. His most pivotal moment came when he unknowingly provided the Dark Lord with a piece of crucial information, one that would ultimately change the course of the war and the fate of all involved. Sybil Trelawney, just over 20 and desperately seeking employment, encountered Albus Dumbledore in Hogsmeade at the Hogshead Inn, where she was residing in hopes of securing the position of Professor of Divination at Hogwarts. Although Dumbledore had no intention of continuing the subject at the school, he decided to offer her a chance due to her lineage. Unfortunately, Sybil demonstrated a complete lack of talent in the art of divination,
I'm so sorry.
prompting Dumbledore to decline her request. Yet, against all odds, she entered a genuine trance at that moment and made a fateful prophecy.
The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal. But he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the 7th month dies.
That day, Severus found himself at the Hog's Head Inn and overheard only part of the prophecy before Aberforth Dumbledore caught him eavesdropping and promptly threw him out.
Get out!
The Death Eater wasted no time in informing Voldemort, who became immediately obsessed with the idea of preventing what had been foretold. At that time, 2 infants could have been the subject of the prophecy: Harry Potter, the half-blood son of James and Lily Potter, and Neville Longbottom, the pure blood son of Frank and Alice Longbottom. Both families had sought to thwart Voldemort 3 times and were members of the Order of the Phoenix. Both children were born at the end of July. But which one?
The boy.
After much contemplation,
It has to be
Voldemort made the mistake
Potter.
of choosing young Potter. Severus knew all too well what that would mean.
It can't be.
Lily would die, and her son along with her. This couldn't happen. It must not happen. Despite the darkness of those final years, Severus had never truly let go of his love for that smiling girl with the red hair, the only person in the world who had ever been able to bring light into his gray, dreary sky. Severus begged Voldemort to spare her, and the Dark Lord reluctantly agreed.
I beg you.
However, knowing that he could not trust anyone else to protect Lily, especially someone as capricious as Voldemort, who might change his mind on a whim, and understanding that Lily would likely fight to the death to protect her child, Severus made his choice. He decided to abandon the Dark Lord for good, and went to Albus Dumbledore,
Please.
desperate to ask for his help in saving her.
Save her.
He pleaded with him to hide Lily,
I will.
along with her husband and son,
And
if
what
he
will
had
you
to.
give me in return?
The old wizard agreed, but insisted
Severus.
that Severus serve him as a spy among the Death Eaters.
Anything.
Despite Dumbledore's best efforts to protect the Potters, Peter Pettigrew, one of James's closest friends, betrayed them by tipping off their location. On the night of October 31st, he arrived at Godric's Hollow and cast the killing curse first on James, then on Lily, who bravely shielded her son. Yet, despite the tragic loss, it was Lily's sacrifice and indirectly Severus's actions that led to the Dark Lord's downfall. Severus's plea had allowed Lily to make the ultimate choice, to die for Harry. This act of selflessness ensured that the curse backfired, leaving her son with the means to survive, while Voldemort's body was destroyed, paving the way for his eventual defeat. After Lily's death, Snape was consumed by grief, his sorrow so deep that he wished for nothing more than to join her in death. The world felt empty, and the weight of his decisions crushed him. But Dumbledore, seeing the fragile state Snape was in, implored him to focus on something greater than his pain:
Severus,
Harry's safety.
please.
It was the least Snape could do in honor of Lily's memory. At first, Snape was reluctant, convinced that the danger had passed. With the Dark Lord vanquished, he thought surely the threat was over. But Dumbledore knew better. He warned Severus that Voldemort's fall was not the end. The Dark Lord would return, and when he did, everyone, especially the boy, would be in grave danger. Reluctantly, Snape understood. Harry's fate, and perhaps the entire wizarding world's, rested on a thread, and he had a role to play in keeping that thread from snapping. So Severus spent the rest of his life protecting Lily's child, Harry Potter, who was often said to strongly resemble James. Distrusted by those on Albus Dumbledore's side for his past as a Death Eater, and hated by his former allies, he became a silent guardian,
Severus.
his loyalty to Lily and her son unwavering,
Protect him.
even as he remained a man torn between 2 worlds, never fully accepted by either, but bound by a sense of duty to protect the boy who carried her legacy. But let's pause for a moment and take a step back, because the events of a story, however solid and unchangeable they may seem, can shift. And such a shift lies in perception, in the personal and emotional experience of the individual. For how would this story unfold if told through the eyes of the kind-hearted Lily Evans? Fiery red hair and a pair of radiant green eyes. The daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Evans, little Lily was born in the heart of a cold winter in 1960. She grew up in Cokeworth, a large town nestled near a grimy river in the Midlands of England. Though not wealthy, her parents showered her with love and care, striving to make her feel cherished and secure. Lily's sunny smile was infectious, lighting up every room she entered and warming the hearts of everyone around her. Everyone, that is, except her older sister, Petunia. Over the years, Petunia had developed a deep-seated jealousy toward Lily, who always seemed to be the smartest, the sweetest, the most talented, and the prettiest in everyone's eyes. Things took a turn when Lily began to develop her unnatural powers, making things happen that were incomprehensible to her sister. But the unsettling confusion in Petunia's eyes was met with nothing but awe and admiration from their parents. How could her mother and father approve of such abnormal behavior from her younger sister? To them, it was a gift. Lily was special. Meanwhile, frustration and a growing sense of inadequacy festered within Petunia, who, despite her deep resentment for Lily, promised her parents she would tell no one about her powers.
Yes, Dad.
Days passed in Cokeworth, and the more Lily's magic manifested, the further Petunia distanced herself, causing the young girl great pain as she desperately sought her approval. Now nearing her 10th birthday, Lily, on an ordinary afternoon in that grey summer, decided to show Petunia that her magic was not something evil or to be feared.
Don't be scared.
Quite the opposite. So, without touching it, Lily made the petals of a flower move, as if it were alive. It was at that moment, as Petunia stood in a mix of fascination and disbelief at Lily's miracle, that a shy boy stepped forward. His name was Severus Snape.
I knew it.
He seemed unable to hold back any longer.
You're a witch.
He whispered. Lily flinched at those words, feeling offended.
What?
She didn't realize that those were the truest things she had ever heard about her nature. The boy revealed to Lily that he too had magical powers, just like hers. The little girl couldn't believe it. Had she finally found someone who could truly understand her? It didn't take long for Lily and Severus to become friends, gradually growing inseparable. For Lily, the boy became the one person she could turn to, the one who gave her the answers to questions no one else seemed to understand. Severus already knew so much about their magical nature, knowledge he had learned from his mother, Eileen, a witch. He also taught her that for magical borns like them, those who, like her sister and parents, lacked magical powers were called muggles. But if her entire family was muggle, then how could she be a witch? Muggle-borns inherit magic from a distant ancestor. Severus told her that they are descended from squibs who married muggles and whose families lost the knowledge of their wizarding legacy, only for the magic to unexpectedly resurface many generations later. Once, Muggle-borns were heavily discriminated against by the wizarding community, who viewed them as a lineage unworthy of wielding magical power. For this reason, they were once derogatorily called mudbloods. This ideology had been strongly supported in the Middle Ages by Salazar Slytherin, an ancient and powerful wizard for whom Severus seemed to have a particular admiration. Despite this, over the centuries, the prejudice against Muggle-borns had significantly diminished, although many pure-blood families still embraced such views. However, Severus seemed to care little for all of that.
Severus?
He saw in Lily an exceptionally brilliant witch with a kind heart,
Good morning.
perhaps the most special person he had ever met in his life. Of course, the friendship between the two was not well received by Petunia, who despised young Severus with every fiber of her being.
I don't like
She
him.
couldn't stand the idea of her younger sister, already peculiar enough, being associated with a ragged boy from that dump of a place called Spinner's End. Lily was spending a quiet afternoon with Severus that day. As always, he was telling her all sorts of things about the wizarding world, satisfying Lily's endless curiosity. He talked to her about Hogwarts, how magic couldn't be used outside of school, and even about Azkaban and the terrible creatures that guarded it. Until Petunia appeared. She had been spying on them, and as usual, didn't miss the chance to mock Severus's humble clothing. There was a crack. A branch over Petunia's head had fallen. Lily screamed. The branch caught Petunia on the shoulder, and she staggered backward and burst into tears.
Toonie!
But Petunia was running away. Lily rounded on Snape.
Did you make that happen?
No.
He looked both defiant and scared.
You did?
She was backing away from him.
You did? You hurt her?
No, I didn't.
But the lie did not convince Lily. After one last burning look, she ran from the little thicket, off after her sister, and Snape looked miserable and confused. As sincere and caring as Severus seemed toward her, Lily knew he wasn't telling her everything. He was a boy full of mysteries. She also suspected that, despite his reassurances to the contrary, he harbored some prejudice against Muggles, just like the pure-blood wizards he had told her about. Yet despite these doubts swirling in her mind, Lily couldn't help but consider him her dearest friend. Lily had turned 11, and now only a few months remained before summer arrived. And with summer, Severus had assured her, their official invitations to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry would arrive. She could hardly contain her excitement. Would she be good enough? Severus already knew so much, spells, potions, while she still knew so little. One day, purely by chance, Lily walked into her sister's room and froze in astonishment. On the nightstand sat an envelope, its seal broken and bearing the crest of Hogwarts. The letter was addressed to Petunia. She had been invited to Hogwarts. Before Lily? Then she must have magical powers too. There could be no doubt. Lily tried to calm her excitement and curiosity, refraining from reading the letter, but when she told Severus about it, the boy refused to believe her. Hogwarts would never, ever contact Petunia, who, according to him, was undoubtedly a Muggle. Driven by his insistence, the two decided to read the letter in secret. It was written by none other than the headmaster himself, Albus Dumbledore. But to Lily's shock and heartbreak, it wasn't an invitation. It was the exact opposite.
Dear Petunia.
Apparently, it was Petunia who had written to Hogwarts, pleading to be admitted to the School of Magic alongside her little sister.
I'm afraid.
Kindly, the headmaster had replied that for
simply
Petunia,
isn't
it would be
possible.
impossible, as magic was not part of her nature.
Yours sincerely,
Lily was deeply affected.
Albus Dumbledore.
Despite the resentment her sister had always harbored toward her, she couldn't help but love her. She could only imagine how much that rejection must have hurt Petunia. Lily never fully understood why her sister had so desperately wanted to be a witch, given her constant disdain for anything related to magic. But the little girl was convinced that for Petunia, going to Hogwarts would have been her chance to finally feel special. And so, the days of spring came to an end, giving way to summer. Just as Severus had assured her, Lily finally received her invitation to attend the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry.
Finally.
She was taken to Diagon Alley, where she purchased all the necessary materials for her lessons, including her wand, crafted by Ollivander, 10 1/4 inches, willow, swishy, and excellent for charm work. September first arrived in the blink of an eye. Lily, accompanied by her parents and sister to King's Cross Station, was ready to begin her new life in the wizarding world. She hugged Petunia tightly, promising that once she got to Hogwarts, she would do everything she could to convince Professor Dumbledore to let her attend the school. But Petunia, in response, replied with cold disdain.
I don't want to go.
Said Petunia, and she dragged her hand back out of her sister's grasp.
You think I want to go to some stupid castle and learn to be a...
Her pale eyes roved over the platform, over the cats mewling in their owners' arms, over the owls fluttering and hooting at each other in cages, over the students, some already in their long black robes, loading trunks onto the scarlet steam engine, or else greeting one another with glad cries after a summer apart.
You think I want to be a freak?
Lily's eyes filled with tears as Petunia succeeded in tugging her hand away.
I'm not a freak.
Said Lily.
That's a horrible thing to say.
That's where you're going.
Said Petunia with relish.
A special school for freaks. You and that Snape boy. Weirdos, that's what you two are. It's good you're being separated from normal people. It's for our safety.
After realizing that Lily and Severus had read her letter, Petunia turned red with embarrassment. Yet her stance didn't shift in the slightest. In fact, her resentment toward her sister only deepened, planting roots so profound that over the years, they might never truly be uprooted. And so, leaving behind bitterness and heartache, Lily stepped onto the train, her eyes filled with hope for the future. During the journey, Severus tried in vain to cheer Lily up, downplaying her conflict with Petunia.
It's okay.
However, his attempts only made things worse.
He hates me.
In an effort to lighten the mood, he admitted his hope that they'd both be sorted into the same house, Slytherin. This caught the attention of James Potter and Sirius Black, two boys passing by their compartment. The pair, eager to be sorted into Gryffindor instead, began taunting Severus, and the situation quickly escalated into a quarrel.
What a pair of rude boys.
Lily thought, stepping in to break up the fight.
Leave him alone.
But by then, James had already taken the opportunity to brand Severus with a nickname he'd use for years to come, Snivelous Snape. When they arrived at the castle for the sorting ceremony, things didn't go as Severus had hoped. Lily, who cared little about which house she'd be placed in, trusted entirely in the judgment of the sorting hat. Without hesitation, it chose Gryffindor. Taking her seat at the Gryffindor table, she caught Sirius's grin, followed by James's. She didn't approve of the way those two show-offs had treated Severus, but somehow she couldn't help feeling happy. For the first time, she felt truly at home. Severus, on the other hand, was sorted into Slytherin. Lily felt a pang of sadness, seeing him seated so far away on the opposite side of the Great Hall, but she consoled herself with the thought that he must be happy. Or was he? At Hogwarts, Lily quickly stood out as one of the brightest students of her year. Her kind demeanor and sharp intelligence earned her the admiration of her professors, particularly Professor Horace Slughorn. It didn't take long for him to invite Lily to join his exclusive Slug Club, a social circle typically reserved for students from prominent wizarding families. The girl, however, was an
Good evening,
exception.
Professor Slughorn.
As a Muggle-born, her inclusion was based purely on merit, her extraordinary talent, which shone especially in the art of potion making. It is highly likely that Lily's exceptional talent in this art was nurtured and partly guided by her best friend, Severus Snape. Having learned advanced techniques from his mother, a gifted potioneer, Severus had become remarkably skilled in the craft at a young age, suggesting that he may have shared many of these secrets with Lily, guiding her to understand complex methods far beyond what was expected of a student in their early years. Their shared passion for potions created an unspoken bond between them, one that,
Thank you, sir.
despite their growing differences, would persist for years to come. As the seasons passed at Hogwarts, the animosity between Severus and James Potter grew steadily sharper. James, a Gryffindor Quidditch chaser, basked in his immense popularity within the castle walls, a stark contrast to Severus, who was often perceived as a brooding, introverted bookworm. James rarely missed an opportunity to mock Severus, egged on by his close-knit group of friends who had earned the nickname the Marauders. Severus, in return, took every chance to retaliate by reporting their mischief to Argus Filch, the school caretaker, hoping to catch them in the act. This clash of egos was something Lily found increasingly difficult to endure. Despite James being her housemate, she couldn't stand his arrogance and the way he flaunted his superiority over her best friend, who often seemed defenseless against such cruelty. Though Severus wasn't entirely blameless in this escalating feud, Lily's loyalty to him made it impossible to overlook James's behavior. Though she didn't want to fully admit it to herself, Lily was deeply unsettled by Severus's new circle of friends. A group of Slytherins driven by an extreme anti-Muggle ideology. They openly revered the one who, in those years, had come to be known as the Dark Lord. He who must not be named. One day, a Gryffindor from her year,
do you want?
Mary MacDonald, was brutally harassed by Mulciber,
Go away.
a pure-blood Slytherin and future Death Eater. Although it is unknown exactly what Mulciber intended to do to Mary, or why he targeted her, it is likely due to her Muggle-born status. Later, during his trial, Igor Karkaroff claimed that Mulciber specialized in the Imperius Curse, suggesting that Mary may have fallen victim to something of that nature. When Lily heard about the incident, she believed it proved that Mulciber had a creepy and evil, perverse sense of humor.
Sev,
However,
he's creepy.
in response to his friend's words,
That was nothing.
Severus merely dismissed the incident,
It was a laugh.
describing it as just a laugh.
That's all.
Lily could sense that something was changing in Severus. The solitude and repressed anger were turning him into someone she no longer recognized. In her 5th year, Lily was appointed prefect of her house, alongside Remus John Lupin. During that year, a tragic event unfolded that would mark the destinies of Lily, Severus Snape, and James Potter, and in hindsight, the fate of the entire wizarding world. It was a spring afternoon when Severus sat by the shore of the Black Lake, engrossed in a book, enjoying the rare quiet. Suddenly, James Potter and the Marauders appeared, their tempers flaring after yet another of Severus's tip-offs to Argus Filch.
Haven't you, Snivels?
Severus barely had time to react.
Levicorpus!
James shouted. In an instant, Severus was hoisted upside down into the air, his robes falling to reveal his underwear. Laughter erupted from the gathering students, including Lily, who had just arrived at the scene. Her face burned with shock and disbelief.
Potter!
How could James be so cruel? A surge of anger filled her. She wanted nothing more than to draw her wand and humiliate Potter the way he was humiliating Severus. But instead, she clenched her fists, forcing herself to remain composed.
Leave him alone.
She shouted, her voice cutting through the laughter. She strode forward, glaring at James.
Stop this right now.
James glanced at her, still smirking, though her words seemed to sting. Before lowering his wand to release the spell, he shot back with an arrogant, unexpected reply.
I will. If you'll go out with me, Evans.
Lily's jaw tightened, her fury boiling over. But before she could say anything, Severus, desperate to reclaim even a shred of his dignity, lashed out.
I don't need your help.
He spat, his voice trembling with anger and humiliation. And then, in a moment of reckless rage, he uttered the words that would haunt him forever.
You filthy mudblood.
Lily blinked.
Fine.
She said coolly.
I won't bother in future. And I'd wash your pants if I were you, Snivellus.
Apologize to Evans.
James roared at Snape, his wand pointed threateningly at him.
I don't want you to make him apologize.
Lily shouted, rounding on James.
You're as bad as he is.
What?
Yelped James.
I'd never call you a you-know-what.
Messing up your hair because you think it looks cool to look like you've just got off your broomstick. Showing off with that stupid snitch. Walking down corridors and hexing anyone who annoys you just because you can. I'm surprised your broomstick can get off the ground with that fat head on it. You make me sick!
She turned on her heel and hurried away.
Evans!
James shouted after her,
Hey, Evans!
but she didn't look back. A sharp pain pierced Lily's heart, a pain she hadn't felt since that September many years ago, just before boarding the Hogwarts Express for the very first time. Why had her friend been so cruel? Snape, Potter, Petunia. Why did they all have to be so full of anger, so eager to sow pain? She felt utterly naive, foolish even, for being unable to find an answer to such a seemingly simple question. That evening, Mary McDonald heard about Severus's plan to spend the night outside the entrance to Gryffindor Tower,
Lily.
waiting to apologize to Lily for calling her such a hurtful
Wants to
name.
sleep outside.
She quickly informed her friend, who, despite her still raw pain, forced herself to leave the dormitory to meet her once close companion. When Lily finally appeared, Severus's heart leapt with hope. He didn't waste a second, pleading for her forgiveness, desperately trying to explain himself.
I never meant
But
to
Lily's
call you-
eyes were filled with hurt, and before she could even think of forgiving him, there was something she had to know.
Is it true?
Quietly, she asked him if it was true, if he truly planned to join the Death Eaters, to serve the Dark Lord once they left school. Severus paused, the weight of her question heavy in the silence that hung between them. He searched for an answer, something that might lessen her disappointment. But in the end, he couldn't bring himself to deny it. His silence spoke louder than any excuse he could muster. In that moment, Lily's expression changed. The sadness in her gaze shifted to something resolute, as though she was seeing him clearly for the first time. She realized that no matter how much she had tried to reach him, no matter how many years they had shared as friends, Severus couldn't or wouldn't change the path he had chosen, even for her. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she turned away, her heart heavy. For Lily, this was the end. Their friendship, once so deep,
Goodbye,
was over.
Severus.
By their 7th year, something unexpected happened. Lily was made head girl, and along with her, James Potter was appointed head boy. something had changed in him over the past 2 years. His arrogance had given way to a kinder demeanor, his boldness transformed into genuine straightforwardness, and his exuberance into courageous initiative. The two of them, due to their positions, spent a lot of time together. Lily helped James with his studies, especially in potions and charms, while James shared his knowledge in defense against the dark arts. Together, they managed to produce one of the most difficult spells ever created, the Patronus Charm, which took the form of a doe for Lily and a stag for James. Eventually, she agreed to go out with James, and after their first date at Honeydukes, filled with laughter and a restrained hint of romance, the two officially began dating, and in the end, became a couple.
You won.
During the Christmas holidays, however, Lily felt that the time had come to heal an old and deep wound. Before the end of her time at Hogwarts, she felt she had to resolve the conflict with her sister Petunia, whom she had never stopped thinking about over the years. She asked James to come with her, to meet her, in the spirit of Christmas. It was 1977 when Lily and James had a disastrous first meeting with Petunia, whose coldness had only hardened over the years. Accompanying her was her fiancé, Vernon Dursley, a muggle she had met in London and whom she was soon to marry. In those years, Petunia had moved to London to pursue a typing course, which led to her landing a clerical job. There, she met Vernon Dursley, a junior executive whose complete ordinariness she found appealing. When the young man proposed to her, Petunia gladly accepted, but secretly worried about what he would think when he met her eccentric little sister. Eventually, Petunia told Vernon about Lily being a witch, and although he was shocked, the man assured her he would not hold it against her, protecting her secret. During their Christmas meeting, surrounded by an unsettling awkwardness, Vernon tried to impress James with the car he drove. When James responded by describing his racing broom, Vernon assumed he must be living on unemployment benefits. James told him about his parents' fortune in galleons, but since Vernon couldn't tell whether he was being taken for a ride or not, he became angry. Lily was unable to calm the situation in any way, only provoking Petunia's wrath once again, who, once more, succeeded in tearing apart her sister's feelings and desire for reconciliation. Vernon and Petunia rushed out of the restaurant, while heavy tears streamed down Lily's face. James, heartbroken to witness her pain, promised that next time he would make it right, apologizing and resolving the situation once and for all. But sadly, we all know that there would never be a next time. The days flew by, and even their 7th year at Hogwarts was drawing to a close. Severus had not stopped associating with his Slytherin friends. On the contrary, his pure-blood idealism had only intensified. Lily knew that seeing her smile alongside James was something Severus found hard to bear. But, after all, both of them had made their choices. The exams arrived, and then, like all good things, their time at the castle came to an end. A dark era was on the horizon. After graduation, Lily and James wasted no time. At just 18, they were married, with Sirius Black serving as their best man at the wedding. It was an intimate and quiet ceremony, largely due to the dangers of the ongoing First Wizarding War. Among the guests were the full Marauders, as well as James's parents, Fleamont and Euphemia, and the Evans family. Petunia, however, did not attend. Supported financially by the Potter family's fortune, Lily and James decided to play their part in the war. They could no longer stand by and watch the ongoing atrocities, and most importantly, they could never sit idly by while Voldemort rose to power and imposed his supremacy. That was not the future they had hoped for. They joined Albus Dumbledore, who was rumored to be founding a group of witches and wizards brave enough to openly challenge Voldemort and his Death Eaters, the Order of the Phoenix. The full Marauders joined the group, along with many of their other former classmates. During those years, Lily, along with James, faced Voldemort in duels 3 times, managing to escape each time. In fact, Lily demonstrated such skill that she impressed the Dark Lord, who did not hesitate to ask her to join him, attempting to exploit her resentment toward her sister, a muggle unable to understand and accept her magical nature. But Lily, needless to say, never allowed herself to be manipulated, just as James did, and they both rejected Voldemort's offer, responding with even more resolve. It was the autumn of 1979 when an unexpected yet joyous piece of news arrived. Lily was expecting a child.
It's a boy.
During that same period, thanks to Lily's former friend, Severus Snape, now among the inner circle of the Death Eaters, the Dark Lord learned of a dangerous prophecy foretelling his defeat and eventual downfall. Partially due to a misunderstanding, and partly because of his own choices, Voldemort believed that Harry, Lily, and James's unborn child was the prophesied one who would bring about his downfall. This possibility could not be allowed to happen. It simply could not. Albus Dumbledore, aware of the prophecy, quickly warned the Potters and worked with them to devise a plan to thwart Voldemort's intentions. Still pregnant, Lily secretly moved with James to Godric's Hollow,
Let's go.
erasing any trace of their whereabouts. In the heart of the summer that year, on July 31st, 1980, Harry Potter was born. Sirius Black was chosen as his godfather, and in those early months, Lily and James raised their son away from prying eyes, under careful protection. So reads a letter written by Lily to Sirius during those days, later found by Harry many years after.
Dear Padfoot, thank you. Thank you for Harry's birthday present. It was his favourite by far. 1 year old and already zooming along on a toy broomstick. He looked so pleased with himself. I'm enclosing a picture so you can see. You know it only rises about 2 feet off the ground, but he nearly killed the cat and he smashed a horrible vase Petunia sent me for Christmas. No complaints there. Of course, James thought it was funny. Says he's going to be a great Quidditch player. But we've had to pack away all the ornaments and make sure we don't take our eyes off him when he gets going. We had a very quiet birthday tea, just us and old Bathilda, who has always been sweet to us, and who dotes on Harry.
We were so sorry you couldn't come, but the orders got to come first, and Harry's not old enough to know it's his birthday anyway.
James is getting a bit frustrated shut up here. He tries not to show it, but I can tell. Also, Dumbledore's still got his invisibility cloak, so no chance of little excursions. If you could visit, it would cheer him up so much. Wormy was here last weekend. I thought he seemed down, but that was probably the news about the McKinnons. I cried all evening when I heard. Bathilda drops in most days. She's a fascinating old thing with the most amazing stories about Dumbledore. I'm not sure he'd be pleased if he knew. I don't know how much to believe, actually, because it seems incredible that Dumbledore could ever have been friends with Gellert Grindelwald. I think her mind's going, personally. Lots of love, Lily.
Despite Dumbledore's best efforts to protect the Potters, Peter Pettigrew, one of James's closest friends, betrayed them by revealing their secret location. On the night of October 31st, Voldemort arrived at Godric's Hollow, finding the Potters defenseless. The Dark Lord acted swiftly and lethally, preventing any attempt to disapparate. Before Harry's innocent eyes, he cast the killing curse first on James, who fell to the ground, lifeless. However, in front of Lily, Voldemort hesitated. He wanted to spare her life. He was only interested in Harry. But Lily was a mother, a woman whose love for her child was the greatest, limitless, and unconditional.
This is my last warning.
In the face of Voldemort's orders, Lily did not move. She sacrificed herself to protect Harry. And so, in one final act of love, Lily exhaled her last breath, leaving this world. But her love did not die with her. It pulsed, strong and relentless. When Voldemort attempted to kill Harry, it acted as an impenetrable shield, disintegrating and reflecting the nature of the Avada Kedavra. The Dark Lord was overwhelmed by his own magic, his mortal body disintegrating. Never before in the history of the wizarding world had such an event occurred. According to Albus Dumbledore, this demonstrated how, beyond ordinary magic, beyond powers that are partially unknown and uncontrollable like ancient magic, this is ultimately the driving force of magic itself, the very foundation upon which life is built. None of the dark magic, no matter how terrible, could ever compete with the primordial simplicity of the feeling and the most natural emotion of every human being, love. After Lily's death, Snape was consumed by grief, his sorrow so deep that he wished for nothing more than to join her in death. The world felt empty, and the weight of his decisions crushed him. But Dumbledore, seeing the fragile state Snape was in, implored him to focus on something greater than his pain, Harry's safety.
Severus.
It was the least he could do in honor of Lily's memory.
Protect him.
It was only then, for the first time in his life, that Snape was able to conjure a Patronus, one whose form could not have been anything other than that of a doe. Despite the pain, despite the hatred, Lily, all those years, had never given up. She had always seen the good in everyone, certain of a future that grew brighter with each passing day. And this choice of hers will be remembered and admired by all in the wizarding world. Because if peace exists today, it is thanks to someone who chose to believe in the good that lives in each of us.
And so, after a few too many tears, we come to the end of this special episode. An episode that taught us something about love. A lesson that may seem simple and obvious, but it hides an incredibly profound meaning. One that only a few will truly listen to. Cursed nostalgia. And so, my dear adventurers of the Wizarding World, I bid you farewell, and thank you for staying with us until the end. I am always your charming Quentin Pendragon, and I'll see you here for another heart-wrenching episode of the Spellbook Chronicles.